August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal. Corpsmen. Robert Mitchell knelt beside the body of a Japanese soldier in the sweltering jungle heat, expecting to find the usual crude field dressings and maybe some rice balls. Instead, he discovered a medical kit so sophisticated that it challenged everything American intelligence had told them about their enemy's capabilities. What he found would revolutionize how the U.S. Navy treated battlefield wounds for the rest of the war. The morning had started like any other during those brutal first weeks on the island. Mitchell's unit had been advancing through dense jungle vegetation when they encountered fierce resistance from well-entrenched Japanese positions. The fighting was savage, close-quarters combat where men died within arm's reach of each other. When the shooting stopped and the Americans began checking the battlefield, Mitchell approached a fallen Japanese soldier to search for intelligence documents. Mitchell had grown up in rural Pennsylvania, the son of a country doctor who often took him on house calls. He'd learned to recognize quality medical equipment at an early age, watching his father work with instruments that had to last for decades in a small-town practice. Before enlisting in the Navy, he'd worked as an orderly at Philadelphia General Hospital, where he'd seen the latest advances in American medical technology. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was about to discover in the humid jungles of the Solomon Islands. The Japanese soldier appeared to be no older than 20, his uniform torn and bloodied from the morning's fighting. Like most enemy dead, he'd been stripped of obvious weapons by earlier search teams, but medical supplies were often overlooked by combat troops focused on ammunition and documents. Mitchell's training as a corpsman had taught him to check every casualty for medical intelligence that might reveal enemy capabilities or vulnerabilities. What caught his attention first wasn't papers or weapons, but a compact leather pouch secured to the soldier's belt. Unlike the bulky first aid kits carried by American troops, this package was streamlined, weatherproofed, and organized with surgical precision. The leather itself was different from anything in U.S. military inventory. Softer, more flexible, treated with some kind of natural preservation that had kept it supple despite weeks in tropical conditions. Mitchell had been a hospital orderly in San Francisco before the war, and he recognized quality medical equipment when he saw it. This wasn't improvised battlefield medicine. This was professional-grade trauma care miniaturized for combat conditions. The closure system alone demonstrated superior engineering. Instead of metal buckles that would corrode in saltwater air, the Japanese had used carved bone fasteners that remained functional regardless of environmental conditions. The stitching showed craftsmanship that exceeded anything Mitchell had seen on American military gear, with threads that appeared to be silk rather than cotton, explaining why the seams remained intact despite obvious rough handling during combat. As Mitchell carefully opened the weatherproof container, he revealed contents that would have impressed surgeons at any major American hospital. The organization was immediately apparent. Every item had its designated place, secured by custom-fitted holders that prevented movement during combat. Color-coded tabs identified different supplies instantly, even in darkness or under stress. Instructions were printed on waterproof paper using a system of symbols that could be understood regardless of literacy level. The entire kit was designed for use by wounded soldiers treating themselves or comrades under the worst possible conditions. The Japanese individual first aid packet, or Kyukyu Bukuro, represented decades of military medical evolution compressed into a space smaller than a cigarette carton. Sterile bandages made from silk that was both stronger and more absorbent than American cotton dressings, antiseptic tablets that could be dissolved in water to create surgical-grade disinfectant, morphine ampules sealed in glass containers with integrated injection systems that eliminated the need for separate needles. But it was the attention to environmental challenges that truly amazed Mitchell. Every component had been designed for extreme humidity, temperature variations, and exposure to salt water. The bandages remained sterile even after weeks in steaming jungle conditions. Glass ampules were protected by shock-absorbing sleeves that prevented breakage during violent combat movement. Even the paper instructions were treated with waterproof coatings that kept them readable after submersion in seawater. Mitchell called over Sergeant James Rodriguez, his unit's senior medic, who had 15 years of Army experience before transferring to the Navy. Rodriguez had served in the Philippines before the war and considered himself an expert on tropical medicine. He'd treated everything from malaria to infected machete wounds during peacetime duty in remote island stations. His first look at the Japanese medical kit left him speechless. Rodriguez examined the contents with growing astonishment, comparing each item to their own medical supplies. American first aid kits of 1942 contained basic bandages, iodine, and morphine syrettes, but nothing approaching this level of sophistication. The Japanese had anticipated problems that American medical planners hadn't even considered. While U.S. military medicine focused on stabilizing casualties for evacuation to rear area hospitals, Japanese kits were designed to keep soldiers fighting despite their wounds. The silk bandages alone represented superior technology that challenged fundamental assumptions about textile manufacturing capabilities in Asia. While American forces used cotton dressings that became soggy and useless in tropical humidity, Japanese silk maintained its integrity even when soaked. The fabric was treated with natural antiseptics that prevented infection without requiring additional chemicals. Weaving techniques created different textures for specific purposes: fine mesh for delicate wounds, heavier material for pressure bandages, and elastic varieties that could secure dressings without cutting off circulation. Rodriguez had seen men die from infections that started in minor wounds, festering in the tropical heat until sepsis set in. The Japanese antiseptic tablets addressed this problem with elegant simplicity that impressed him as both medically sound and tactically brilliant. Each tablet contained a precise mixture of compounds that created different concentrations depending on the amount of water used: light pink solution for cleaning wounds, deeper red for sterilizing instruments, and dark purple for disinfecting clothing or equipment. The system was foolproof and required no medical training to use effectively. The color-coding system extended beyond the antiseptic tablets to every component of the kit. Green tags indicated items for treating bleeding wounds, blue marked supplies for burns and skin injuries, red designated pain relief medications, yellow indicated items for treating infections. The system allowed rapid identification of needed supplies, even by wounded soldiers whose vision might be impaired by blood loss or shock. The morphine delivery system impressed both medics as much as the drug itself. American troops carried morphine syrettes, small tubes with attached needles that had to be inserted manually. The process required steady hands and good lighting, luxuries rarely available in combat. Japanese ampules featured spring-loaded mechanisms that automatically injected precise dosages when pressed against skin. Even wounded soldiers could administer pain relief to themselves with one hand while maintaining weapon readiness with the other. But the Japanese system went beyond simple pain relief. The morphine formulation itself appeared different from American supplies, providing effective pain management without the drowsiness that made American soldiers vulnerable to enemy attack. Laboratory analysis conducted months later would reveal that Japanese military pharmacologists had developed synthetic compounds that provided analgesia while maintaining alertness and coordination necessary for continued combat effectiveness. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the unit. Lieutenant Colonel William Harrison, the battalion medical officer, arrived within hours to examine the find personally. Harrison had graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School and served in military hospitals across the Pacific. He'd assumed that Japanese medical capabilities were primitive, based on intelligence reports describing their army as poorly equipped and medically backward. The evidence before him suggested either massive intelligence failures or deliberate deception by enemy propaganda designed to lull American forces into complacency. Harrison's examination revealed additional sophisticated features that had been overlooked during initial inspection. Hidden compartments contained specialized tools, miniaturized surgical scissors with spring-loaded handles that could be operated with one hand, forceps designed for removing shrapnel in low-light conditions, and scalpels with retractable blades protected by spring-loaded sheaths. Each instrument showed manufacturing precision that equaled or exceeded American medical equipment produced by the finest surgical supply companies. The quality control standards evident in every component suggested industrial capabilities that challenged prevailing assumptions about Japanese manufacturing. Tolerances were held to specifications that exceeded American military requirements. Surface finishes showed attention to detail that indicated sophisticated metallurgy and quality assurance procedures. Even minor components like fasteners and springs demonstrated engineering excellence that contradicted intelligence assessments of Japanese technological limitations. As more Japanese positions were overrun in the following days, similar medical kits were recovered from every soldier. This wasn't experimental equipment issued to elite units. It was standard gear carried by ordinary infantry, suggesting that Japan had invested enormous resources in battlefield medicine at a level that reached every frontline soldier. The implications were disturbing for American planners who had assumed technological superiority in all aspects of warfare. Each recovered kit revealed new innovations that forced American medical officers to reconsider their assumptions about enemy capabilities. Some contained surgical instruments miniaturized for field use, but maintaining hospital-quality precision. Others featured wound closure strips that bonded with body fluids to create waterproof seals stronger than traditional sutures. Several kits included pain relief medications that provided effectiveness equal to morphine without the side effects that impaired combat performance. Harrison began documenting every item in detail, sending reports to Navy Medical Headquarters in Pearl Harbor. The responses revealed widespread disbelief among senior medical officers who had built their careers on assumptions of American technological superiority. How could Japan, portrayed in American media as a backward nation of rice farmers and fishermen, have developed medical technology superior to anything in U.S. military inventory? The cognitive dissonance was so severe that some officials initially dismissed the reports as enemy propaganda designed to demoralize American forces. The reality became undeniable as more evidence accumulated from multiple sources across the Pacific theater. Japanese medical kits contained items that didn't exist in American equivalents. Pressure bandages with built-in tourniquets that could stop arterial bleeding without cutting off circulation completely. Advanced wound closure systems that eliminated the need for evacuation to surgical facilities. Pain relief formulations that maintained combat effectiveness while providing adequate analgesia for continued fighting. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a Navy nurse who had served in China before the war, provided crucial context for understanding Japanese medical advances. She'd witnessed Japanese military hospitals in occupied territories and noted their emphasis on trauma surgery and battlefield medicine. Unlike American medical schools that focused on civilian practice, Japanese military doctors trained specifically for combat conditions. Their entire system prioritized keeping soldiers fighting rather than simply treating casualties for later rehabilitation. The organizational philosophy behind Japanese medical kits reflected this combat-focused approach that contrasted sharply with American medical doctrine. American first aid emphasized stabilizing wounded men for evacuation to rear-area hospitals, where sophisticated surgical facilities could provide definitive treatment. Japanese kits were designed to return soldiers to duty as quickly as possible, using medical technology that enabled continued combat effectiveness despite significant injuries. Bandages were formulated to maintain mobility while healing, using materials and techniques that allowed wounded soldiers to continue fighting without compromising their ability to move and shoot effectively. Pain medications provided relief without impairment, using pharmaceutical compounds that eliminated suffering while preserving the alertness and coordination necessary for combat operations. Antiseptics prevented infections that would require lengthy hospitalization, keeping soldiers in the field where they could contribute to military objectives. Every component served the goal of maintaining combat effectiveness rather than simply preserving life. The Japanese had concluded that battlefield medicine should be a force multiplier that kept more soldiers in action rather than a humanitarian service that removed casualties from combat zones. This philosophical difference was evident in every aspect of their medical kit design and represented a fundamentally different approach to military medicine than anything in American doctrine. As American forces adapted to jungle warfare, they began incorporating Japanese medical techniques into their own practices. The silk bandages proved so superior that Navy medical supply officers began ordering similar materials from manufacturers in China and India. The antiseptic tablet system was reverse-engineered and modified for American production. Even the organizational methods were copied, with color coding systems and waterproof packaging becoming standard in later U.S. medical kits. The discovery had strategic implications beyond medical care that troubled intelligence officers and military planners. If Japan had invested such resources in battlefield medicine for ordinary soldiers, what other capabilities had American intelligence underestimated? The sophisticated medical kit suggested a level of industrial organization and scientific development that contradicted prevailing assumptions about Japanese technological abilities and manufacturing capacity. Mitchell continued finding new surprises as he examined more captured kits throughout the Guadalcanal campaign. Some contained additional specialized equipment that revealed even greater sophistication in Japanese military medicine, portable diagnostic tools that could assess wound severity and guide treatment decisions, sterilization equipment that functioned without reliable power sources, emergency surgical kits designed for use in caves and bunkers where conventional medical facilities couldn't be established. The attention to environmental challenges impressed American medics who had struggled with equipment failures in tropical conditions. Japanese medical supplies were designed specifically for the extreme humidity, temperature variations, and saltwater exposure that characterized Pacific Island warfare. Bandages remained sterile and functional even after weeks in steaming jungle conditions. Medications maintained their potency despite temperature extremes that destroyed American pharmaceutical supplies. Metal instruments resisted corrosion that rendered American equivalents useless within days of deployment. Even the packaging demonstrated superior engineering that solved problems American quartermasters hadn't recognized. Each kit was contained in a leather pouch, treated with natural water-repelling compounds that remained flexible in extreme cold and didn't crack in desert heat. Closures used bone or horn fasteners that wouldn't corrode like metal hardware. Interior compartments were lined with materials that absorbed shock while maintaining organization during violent combat movement. The psychological impact on American troops was significant and troubling for morale officers who had worked to maintain confidence in American technological superiority. Many soldiers had entered the Pacific War confident that American industrial might guarantee better equipment than any enemy could provide. The Japanese medical kits challenged this assumption in the most personal way possible. When wounded, American soldiers now knew their enemies had better tools for staying alive and returning to combat. Rodriguez began carrying captured Japanese medical supplies as backup to his standard issue kit, despite regulations that technically prohibited the use of enemy equipment. The silk bandages had saved several Americans when conventional dressings failed in the humid conditions. The antiseptic tablets had prevented infections that might have required evacuation from the combat zone. Even the organizational system helped locate supplies quickly during chaotic casualty situations where seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Other American medics followed Rodriguez's example, creating an informal network of knowledge sharing about Japanese medical innovations. They developed techniques for integrating captured supplies with standard American equipment, maximizing the advantages of both systems. Field modifications and adaptations were shared through unofficial channels, improving American battlefield medicine through the adoption of enemy innovations. Intelligence officers interrogated captured Japanese medics to understand how such sophisticated equipment had been developed and distributed throughout their military system. The answers revealed a medical establishment that prioritized practical battlefield results over theoretical knowledge. Japanese military medicine focused on techniques that worked under combat stress rather than procedures that looked good in training manuals but failed under actual fighting conditions. Field testing was conducted extensively during conflicts in China, where lessons learned from actual combat were immediately incorporated into equipment design and medical protocols. Unlike American medical development, which relied heavily on laboratory research and peacetime training exercises, Japanese military medicine evolved through continuous battlefield experience and rapid implementation of improvements based on combat feedback. The Japanese had also learned from examining captured American and European medical supplies during earlier conflicts, identifying weaknesses in Western medical approaches, and developing solutions specifically designed to address those problems. The result was medical technology that seemed almost custom designed to outperform American equivalents under Pacific combat conditions. Cultural factors contributed to the superior design in ways that American medical officers found difficult to understand or replicate. Japanese soldiers were trained to treat their own wounds and continue fighting rather than seeking immediate evacuation to medical facilities. Medical kits needed to support this philosophy with supplies that enabled effective self-treatment under the worst possible circumstances. American medical doctrine emphasized rapid evacuation to professional medical care, which worked well in Europe but proved inadequate in the isolated island campaigns of the Pacific. The manufacturing quality impressed American technical experts who examined captured supplies using laboratory analysis techniques. Japanese medical kit components showed precision manufacturing comparable to Swiss watches, with quality control measures that ensured consistent performance across millions of units produced. Tolerances were held to standards that exceeded American military specifications. The attention to detail suggested industrial capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about Japanese manufacturing abilities. Material science advances evident in Japanese medical supplies indicated research and development programs that had been underway for years before the war began. Synthetic materials that didn't exist in American inventory. Chemical compounds that provided superior performance in tropical conditions. Manufacturing techniques that achieved results thought impossible by American industrial engineers. The sophistication suggested scientific capabilities that intelligence assessments had completely missed. As the Guadalcanal campaign progressed, American medical practices evolved to incorporate lessons learned from captured Japanese equipment. Field hospitals began stocking silk bandages and antiseptic tablets when supplies could be obtained through unofficial channels. Combat medics requested training on Japanese wound treatment techniques that proved more effective than standard American procedures. The enemy's medical innovations were saving American lives, creating uncomfortable ironies for military planners who preferred to maintain technological superiority in all areas. Dr. Harrison compiled comprehensive reports on Japanese medical capabilities that were distributed throughout the Pacific Fleet medical establishment. His findings influenced medical supply procurement decisions, training programs, and battlefield procedures for the remainder of the war. American medical kits issued in 1944 contained many features first discovered in Japanese equipment recovered on Guadalcanal, though official sources rarely acknowledged the origin of these improvements to avoid admitting that enemy technology had been superior. The individual first aid packets represented just one aspect of Japanese medical sophistication that became apparent as American forces captured larger installations throughout the Pacific campaign. Field hospitals equipped with surgical instruments that rivaled anything found in major American medical centers. Operating rooms designed for rapid setup and breakdown during tactical withdrawals. Sterilization equipment that functioned reliably without dependable power sources. Medical supplies designed to maintain effectiveness despite storage in underground bunkers for extended periods. Advanced pharmaceutical capabilities became evident as captured medical supplies were analyzed by Navy laboratory facilities. Pain medications that provided effective relief without the drowsiness and coordination impairment associated with American morphine. Antibiotics that remained potent despite tropical storage conditions that destroyed American pharmaceutical supplies. Anesthetics that could be administered safely by non-medical personnel using foolproof delivery systems. The lesson for American forces was clear and troubling for established assumptions about technological superiority. Their enemy had invested heavily in keeping soldiers alive and fighting, using medical technology as a force multiplier rather than simply a humanitarian necessity. The Japanese understood that superior medical care translated directly into superior combat effectiveness. Well-treated wounded soldiers returned to duty faster and fought more aggressively, knowing their military would provide the best possible care if they were injured. Mitchell kept one of the first Japanese medical kits he'd discovered as a personal reminder of how quickly assumptions could be proven wrong by battlefield reality. Years after the war, he would show it to his children as an example of how enemies could teach valuable lessons if approached with open minds rather than predetermined prejudices. The sophisticated medical supplies had saved American lives by forcing improvements in U.S. battlefield medicine, proving that good ideas transcended national boundaries and ideological differences. The captured Japanese medical kits became teaching tools in American medical schools after the war, where students studied the organizational principles and design innovations that had made enemy medical care so effective under combat conditions. Many features pioneered by Japanese military medicine were incorporated into civilian emergency medical services, influencing how Americans approached trauma care for decades after the fighting ended. For Rodriguez, the discovery changed his entire approach to battlefield medicine and influenced his post-war career in civilian emergency services. He spent the rest of his military service advocating for medical kit improvements based on Japanese innovations, writing reports and recommendations that influenced the development of American medical equipment used in Korea, Vietnam, and subsequent conflicts. The enemy's medical technology had made him a better medic and helped save countless American lives through the lessons learned from superior enemy equipment. The irony wasn't lost on those who lived through the experience of discovering that their supposedly primitive enemy possessed medical technology superior to their own. American forces had entered the Pacific War expecting to teach their enemies about modern warfare and advanced technology. Instead, they learned crucial lessons about battlefield medicine from soldiers they'd assumed were backward and poorly equipped. The Japanese medical kits represented a humbling reminder that innovation could come from unexpected sources and that assumptions about enemy capabilities could be dangerously wrong. As American forces island-hopped across the Pacific, they continued discovering evidence of Japanese medical sophistication that challenged every assumption about enemy technological capabilities. Each new campaign revealed additional innovations that forced reevaluation of intelligence assessments, portable X-ray equipment that operated on battery power, surgical kits designed for use in caves and underground bunkers, medications formulated specifically to remain stable in tropical storage conditions. The pattern was clear. Japan had systematically addressed every challenge of battlefield medicine with scientific precision and engineering excellence. The legacy of those captured medical kits extended far beyond World War II, influencing American military medicine for decades after the conflict ended. Japanese innovations continued saving lives in subsequent conflicts as American medical technology incorporated lessons learned from enemy equipment. The organizational principles influenced civilian emergency medicine, improving trauma care in hospitals across the United States. Even the material science advances, silk bandages, waterproof packaging, corrosion-resistant instruments, found applications in peacetime medical practice. Mitchell often reflected on that first morning when he'd opened a simple leather pouch and discovered technology that challenged everything he thought he knew about enemy capabilities. The Japanese medical kit had been more than medical equipment. It was a lesson in the dangers of underestimating an enemy and the value of learning from superior techniques regardless of their origin. In the brutal calculus of warfare, good medicine was good medicine, no matter which flag it served under. The shock of discovering Japanese medical superiority had lasting effects on American military planning and intelligence assessment procedures. No longer could intelligence officers assume that American technology was automatically superior to enemy equipment. Each new theater of operations required careful assessment of enemy capabilities rather than assumptions based on racial or cultural stereotypes. The Japanese medical kits had taught a valuable lesson about the costs of overconfidence and the importance of accurate intelligence about enemy capabilities. For the American medics who first discovered those sophisticated kits in the jungles of Guadalcanal, the memory remained vivid decades after the war ended. They had expected to find crude bandages and basic supplies reflecting the primitive medical capabilities they'd been told to expect. Instead, they encountered medical technology that was often superior to their own, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about their enemy's capabilities and their own assumptions about technological superiority in modern warfare.